I started writing a story once about a fictional troupe of funerary artisans. What I guess you'd call them hoaxsters as well. They used the same materials that legitimate tombstone makers used to create realistic looking tombstones for people who never existed. They'd set up somewhat elaborate traps, if you will, where people who would see these tombstones might be tempted to look these people up on the internet. And they'd set up websites for these fictional people anonymously, using free website builders and leaving no trace of their fingerprints. But with the story, I don't think I arrived at a single purpose for doing this. But then I think about it now, maybe there didn't need to be a single purpose. Like, for instance, I feel like, I have some strong feelings about the subject of suicide. I don't like to talk about it much because it seems to trigger misguided reactions from people, but I feel strongly that awareness and understanding of what drives people to do that is not very articulate in the general discussion of such things. If more people were aware of just how much or how many people take their lives every single day, they would think it was an epidemic. I think they'd be right. But I've read about this sort of thing, and nobody has really arrived at a single explanation for what drives people to do it. Every circumstance is different, I suspect, but my point being, these folks who set up the fake tombstones for people that never existed could guide people to a website about this fictional person who, as the story goes, took their own life. Or maybe they could actually dig up a story of a real person who suicided and it was never reported. And that's the reason that there's so little awareness of how common it is that it very rarely gets reported in the papers or anywhere unless it's impossible to keep a secret. So that could be one of the causes that these funerary artisan hoaxsters are trying to raise awareness of. So they create a website for, I don't know, make up a name. I think they were going to base their names on the names that they came up with the fake names that show up in return addresses from spam emails. But I don't know, let's just say Darcy McKenzie or something. I think they wanted to be careful not to use a real name. They wanted to come up with a believable, credible looking name that that did not seem to exist on the internet. I don't think that would be impossible to come up with. So somebody finds that tombstone out in the cemetery and then connects to these websites and learns about certain causes. So suicide awareness might be one of them. It might be missing persons who don't get the kind of media coverage that missing white women do. But I was in love with the idea of this underground network of artists who create perfectly legitimate looking tombstones to either raise awareness of a cause or perhaps just to sow confusion and to see how far bad information can travel when it rises up, not from a garbage Wikipedia article, but when it rises up from the so-called real world. I had a brief conversation with a woman at Old Calvary over the weekend. She was looking for a particular site. I don't usually talk to people at the cemetery because they're not usually in the best frame of mind to socialize, but she was, she was in good spirits, looking for long ago ancestors, I think. But we had this conversation about all the garbage content that is out there on the genealogical websites. And she was talking about how somebody who had a very common name, all these people with that same surname added themselves to his list of descendants. And so this one individual had dozens of phantom descendants that really had no connection to him. But people just believe what they want. When they find it on the internet, they believe what they want to believe. But that's not a new phenomenon by any stretch. Certainly not new to the internet. We've always chosen to believe what we want to believe. But I was thinking in this funerary artisan collective that they deliberately put real names of people who had unmarked burial sites, and they put those real names on the real unmarked site, but then they throw in some fake names just to see how far those fake names travel, and to see if they could create a whole lineage, a whole clan of people that never really existed. You can do that pretty easily on the internet now, that kind of thing. But to do it more artfully and artistically would be a fun fictional account to work with. Just thinking about that, because guess where I am again? I'm at this is New Calvary, which I don't hit this one up too often, as often as the other Old Calvary. I'm trying out a new piece of gear. I put a lens hood on this camera because the lens flare was driving me crazy. The encounter with the trolley car, the lens flare on that thing was atrocious, but I'll take it. The content was worth it, and I don't think most people really care about lens flare. It's just, it makes it look like the lens is filthy, and that's not the problem. Sound like I'm dropping names, but I've been friendly with Joey Skaggs, who is regarded as the world's greatest living prankster. I was thinking of giving him a call to see what he thinks of the funerary artisan hoaxsters and what point they could be trying to make. I mean, I talked about suicide awareness and maybe missing persons who don't get as much attention as missing white women. And I guess the purpose of this would be to create names that guide curiosity seekers to the internet to see who that person was. Or maybe you even try to create a live connection. Like you pepper a tombstone with the name of a living descendant who just has their birth year with a hyphen followed by the unknown year of death, the blank space for that, for the yet to be determined, yet to be announced, DOD. So you create like a real family. I mean, you create a mostly fake family, but then put a real person in there. Maybe it's yourself. And you just wait to hear from the curiosity seekers. There's a lot to work with, I suppose, but just something to think about, something I was just chewing on as I unexpectedly found myself out here again. By the way, today is October 20th, 2021, making this the 31st anniversary of the day I moved to New York. And I still remember the moment that Amtrak train pulled me out of Tampa for good. My mother was standing there in the station, and with a distinct and obvious mix of anticipation and sadness, she really wanted me out of her house. And I wanted out even worse than she wanted me out. Which then, after I was gone, she just always assumed I was going to come right back, that I wouldn't make it in New York. Even she had to admit at some point that I made it here. It was after 9/11, though, that she really poured it on, assuming that I'd be scared or unwilling to live here anymore under these threats. And I said, no way. I told her I love New York more than ever. I don't think she ever forgave me for that. That she never forgave me for moving here in the first place. I don't think I ever seriously considered living anywhere else. I'm certain, I'm sure it has crossed my mind, and I've probably had conversations about it, but the reality of things is that I don't think I'd want to be anywhere else. I'd probably like Chicago, all right. I don't mind the cold, but the wind would probably drive me crazy, though. I think I'd like Tokyo. But I've always felt comfortable here. And in all its ugliness and filth and even its meanness, I've always found beauty. Look at that. Looks like somebody destroyed the sign. This was, the map. This was the map of the grounds. That looks deliberate. That's unfortunate. So what have been the highlights of my life in New York? I don't know. I still haven't found that lasting love. But over the last few years, I've come to think that I never really wanted that in the first place. A woman who's a permanent presence in my life. And I think of how much time I wasted pursuing that kind of thing. I can't say that getting that first corporate job was not a big deal. It kind of made a lot of things possible. I mean, I came into adulthood with a lot of debt, student loan debt and legal bills, and penalties for some telecommunications frauds that I was being penalized for stuff I couldn't possibly have done, but I think they were just trying to send a message. That's a long story, though. But finally getting out of debt was the greatest feeling of wealth I've ever had. I'd rather have zero debt than all the money you could throw at me. I shouldn't have said it like that. I'll take all the money you can throw at me, too. Just so long as I don't have any debt sucking it away from me. Reminds me of something Donald Trump said. I hate to bring him up, but he can be... There were times when I would read quotes from him where I think this guy's got to be a lot smarter than he makes himself look. But in particular, he was at sort of the bottom of his financial crisis, I guess, where he owed billions in debt. And he went downstairs, he was with somebody, and he saw the homeless dude sleeping outside his building, and he said, "I envy those guys. At least they've got nothing." That's a starting point. You know, he was looking at billions of dollars in debt. He had far less than nothing. Certainly being on the front page of the New York Times was a highlight. And all that press coverage I got for what I did to save the payphone. Failed miserably, of course, but some of the attention that came from that was certainly a highlight. The 3 years I spent dating a Muslim woman will always bring a smile to me. Closest thing I came to even thinking about marriage, but I can be pretty glad I didn't go there. She moved on. Became everything she said she didn't want to be. An Arab wife. But I will always love her. So this is the first and so far only Columbarium at either New Calvary or Old. According to the cemetery, it's been selling well, but I don't know. Catholics weren't really big on cremation until I don't even remember when they changed their tune, but I don't think the Catholics never formally banned it, or you wouldn't get excommunicated posthumously for doing it, but they didn't encourage it either, but that's changed. I don't know what that noise is, but it's making me crazy. Something they really need to improve here is the numbers. You can barely read them. I think that says 203. Oh, actually it's 283 because I can read. That says 282. They really need to improve that. They do it over here. It's obvious what a difference it makes in being able to find a particular number. Starting to think somebody went on a rampage here with tearing out that map, and I don't think a single one of these section signs is intact. A lot of them are just missing altogether. I mean, it really looks like somebody deliberately destroyed a lot of these. Looks like they paved this little piece of road, freshly paved. But if I'm going to talk about highlights or influences or turning points, my involvement with the apology line was certainly influential in ways I didn't give it full credit for a long time. I mean, it ended up being an ugly breakup with Alan and me, but thanks to my involvement there, I got on the internet early. I got online as early as 1992. Found the internet. I was only on like self-contained BBS's, the walled gardens as they called them, which had certainly no easy or obvious access to the internet. First open internet content I ever saw was Usenet, and I just remember being in awe. But thanks to being an early adopter. I scored a pretty fat gig at Time Warner. I mean, in those days, all you had to be able to do was get a directory listing at a command prompt, and they'd sign you up. But I had more developed skills than that, but you certainly didn't need any computer programming school or training or anything, because they hadn't developed training for that stuff yet. Now I think you can get a major in search engine optimization and all this stuff that I learned just as it came to me. I've always believed that I learned code quickly, computer code, having never taken a single course in it. I think I learned it quickly because I'm a musician, and because if you know how to read music, I mean, music is code. It's a very complex and robust form of code, but I think that my background in that would have limbered up that part of my brain that could learn other types of code. I could probably learn foreign languages pretty easily too. But that involvement with Apology got me online, and that's kind of changed everything. Never looked back. So I was at Time Warner for 7 years, and that has proven in many, many ways to be one of the more formative experiences, and it still resonates in my day-to-day life to this very day. I've been gone from there since '02. Haven't had a real job since. But I work. Don't get the wrong idea. I didn't cash out big time from Time Warner. It wasn't like that. But of course, my most enduring contribution, a real intangible thing that I've done in New York. And I don't mean to come back to the subject of suicide again, but as a proof, is to demonstrate my feelings about awareness and how society really needs to get a better understanding. I was the one who got a crisis counseling and suicide prevention telephone put up on the RFK Triborough after I badgered the MTA about it for something like 9 years. And they finally put this thing in. It made me angry because there was a sign on the bridge that said "Life is worth living" or something like that, and then it said there is a crisis counseling telephone 150 feet ahead, but there was never any phone there. I talked about this with other people who'd seen it, and they all said the same thing. It was like a fucking cruel joke. And I badgered them about it about once a year, and I'd always get the same response that, look, there's a phone up there, pal, and if you need help, use it. And I wasn't in need of help like that, but finally there was one response I got that just finally teed me off once and for all. And I went to the press, and I found this newish NYC website that really dug into this type of story, this kind of hyper-local, hyper-specific. And I guess on account of that article, I'll never really know if it was solely because of that or me badgering them or both, but the day that article posted was the day they put the phone up on the bridge. I take a lot of pride in that. Yeah, this is where my funerary artisans would get their blanks. Get their blank tombstone canvases to work with. Or maybe that's not allowed. Maybe you have to actually be in the business to be able to buy that stuff. That's a little factual detail that shouldn't be too hard to verify one way or the other. But they have to get their tombstone material somewhere, even if they end up stealing it, perhaps. You know what I think? There's a video that I posted here sometime last year of a phone booth in Woodside, and as I was shooting my video of it, I was approached by somebody who identified himself as a gang member, and he told me to stop making that video. He asked me what the hell I was doing. When I explained to him it's just something I do, he totally softened and let me off the hook. But that phone booth was spray painted with the names of the dead. He said these were the names of what he called fallen soldiers. They were the victims of Woodside gang violence. And I think that those names on top of that truck are two of the names that I spotted on that phone booth. I got schooled today on the meaning of this payphone's graffiti. A dude identifying himself as a gang member approached me, and he asked why I was taking pictures of this payphone. He was confrontational and pointed at my phone and told me to delete whatever pictures I'd just taken. And I faked doing that, but then he asked again, why was I doing this? I said, it's something I do. I document payphones. And, you know, I'm not going to lie, I was nervous. I'm no gangster, and I think that was pretty obvious to him and also to another gang member that appeared as this conversation developed. And he said, these are the names of the dead. I thought he was referring to COVID casualties, but then he clarified, these are the names of people killed in the gang violence around here, Woodside. And he called these people fallen soldiers. He asked if I was a reporter. I said no. He asked if I'm a cop. I said no. And I just clarified, I iterated, I do this for my own satisfaction. And he softened it. He's like, you do this just because you want to do this? And I said, yeah. And he put his hand on his chest and he said, so it's like a passion you have. And I laughed a little and I said, I guess you could call it that. And then he totally relaxed. He's like, that's all right. That's all right, man. You know, he went from telling me to delete all my photos to encouraging me to get more photos of the phone. And he said, if you post that to the internet, be sure to explain what this is and what it means. And he kept saying it again. These are fallen soldiers, man. And then he said, this is a bad part of town. And I could tell he was implying that I really shouldn't be here. But what can I say? It gave me goosebumps. This phone went from a squalid mass of graffiti to a descanso of sorts, like a roadside memorial for the victims of gang violence. And wouldn't you know it, I didn't realize this, but I'm heading right into that area where that phone booth used to be. It's been removed. That makes it all the more reasonable that the names spray painted on that truck would be the ones I think I remember from that old booth. I remember he said these are the names of the dead, and I thought he meant COVID, but then he went on to explain that these are the gang violence victims. I couldn't find a whole lot of reportage on it, but a lot of that stuff doesn't get reported. But I believe the guy. But he ended up, you know, he just asked me a bunch of questions. He asked me if I was a cop. He asked me if I was a reporter or whatever. And he says, so this is just something you do because you love doing it. I said, yeah, I document payphones. It's just something I've been doing a long time. And he says, so it's a passion that you have. And he put his hand on his chest. I said, yeah, I guess you could call it that. have a lot of passions, but it was a good conversation. But he kind of warned me not that I shouldn't be passing through here. And here I'm about to do that again, but I think I am actually going to take a detour. Not because I'm afraid to go through there, it's just I'd rather take a different route. Oh wow, that's the first new one I've seen in New York in a while. New to me. Old phone number. Fairbanks 45000. You see the newer versions of the Gun Hill fence signs around, but they have the modern phone number. But they left one of their old Fairbanks signs lying around. How about that? I have a couple of other of these Gun Hill Fairbanks signs in my collection, but this is a new one to me. And there's yet another old phone number, although I think I've seen this one before. And off the top of my head, I can't remember what BA stands for.